In this session, we're going to look at how we can move a USGS surface that we get for free in InfraWorks, and we'll look at how we can take that surface and move it into Revit. I'm going to start by identifying my area of interest. We have a photo on screen that shows us that location. Project location's right here. And over to the left, we can see the address of that location, 3000 Horizon Drive, King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. Once I've identified my area of interest, I'm going to bring up InfraWorks. And using InfraWorks, I can create an existing conditions model that contains that USGS surface. So to build that model, I'll click the Model Builder button, and then I can type my address here in the upper right corner. We'll type Horizon Drive, King. You see I don't have to type the entire thing there. I can just grab it from the list. This gives me a street view, although if I hover over this button in the upper right, I can get an aerial view as well. This is helpful. Let me drag this over so I can roll the wheel forward and zoom in as well. So there's our site. That's what we're interested in. I'm going to back up a little bit here. To create a model from this site, I am going to use the rectangle tool, and then I will click, hold, and drag, and I'll define the rectangle. I could always edit this using the grips later. You can see I'm making a relatively small model here, 0.26 square kilometers. We can go all the way up to 200 square kilometers if we want to. I will then give this model a name. For right now, I'm just going to call it Sample. After I give it a name, I can then select the BIM 360 project I'd like to place it in. Now, you don't have to put it in a BIM 360 project if you don't want to. You can do it locally as well. Since I'm logged in and I'm connected to BIM 360, I'm going to select my project here. I've got a project called PA Demo. When I select that project, it takes me to that area in the list. Basically, I'm seeing the folders that we would see in BIM 360 docs here. So inside project files, I would grab this InfraWorks model folder, and I could come down and click Create Model. And InfraWorks would go out and find any freely available road information, buildings, aerial photography, and elevational data to build this model. Now, rather than clicking Create Model, I've already made one of these. So let me click the X here to close this. Basically, when the model's finished, it'll pop up here in the InfraWorks interface. You can see there's the one that I created a minute ago. So when I open this up, we can see we've got the aerial photo, we've got a surface, we've got some roads in here. If I roll forward here, we can see some of the contour information. So kind of interesting. We've got some relief there on the, looks like the north side of the site. A couple things. The reason I'm seeing these contours is because I'm using the engineering view. If I select that, I can change the display of the contours by clicking this gear. And then I could click this small mountain range here. And right here is where I can set my major and minor interval. I'm seeing a minor contour every 1 foot, and then the index contours are every 5. We can also turn these on and off if we want to. Just wanted to show you that. One more thing, if you've just installed InfraWorks, by default, sometimes it installs as metric. If I bring up the tools here, I can come down to application options. And in the dialog box, we can go to unit configuration. Just want to show you right here. You can set that to imperial, and then it'll be using imperial units. So let me close this. All right, so I have my model. I want to create a surface from this. So let's do this. I've got some road information in here. You can see some of this came along for the ride. I don't need this. If I export this surface, sometimes these roads will take some liberties with the contours. It'll actually, start creating contours and things that go across the roads. I just want the USGS data. So I'm going to create a new proposal. I'll do that by selecting this master proposal up here, and I'll click Add. A proposal is like a variation of this model. And I'll just call this surface underscore only, and I'll click OK. That essentially created kind of like a copy of this model. So from here, I'm going to click the InfraWorks button, and then I'll click this cube, and I'll click Data Sources, and this shows me the data that I got from Model Builder. So I don't think it looks like I got a couple of buildings in there. I don't want these buildings. I don't want anything interfering with my surface, so I'm just going to right-click on that, and I'll choose Remove. We'll take out that feature. And then I'm going to go to roads. I don't need these roads at all either. Let me right click and I'll choose Remove. And I'll click Yes. So that's perfect. I want to keep the image and I want to keep the terrain there. So this gives me a nice clean surface. If I want to kind of square this up, I can click the top hotspot there on the view cube. Get that a little bit closer. All right. So let's do one more thing. It's going to be very important when I align this in Revit. I'm going to use a coordinate system, northings, eastings, elevations. So I'm going to need to assign a coordinate system to this model. So what coordinate system should I use? Let me bring up Windows Explorer here for a second. And I'm going to open an image. This is an image I downloaded from the internet. When it comes to Pennsylvania, there are essentially two state plane coordinate systems. You have a north version and a south version. The colorized counties here represent which counties are in which coordinate system. So you have two coordinate systems, but then there are several variations of those coordinate systems. You got NAD 27, NAD 83, HARN. Fortunately, I mean, it's not complicated here. Let me show you what we'll do. The King of Prussia site is located in Montgomery County, so it's going to be Pennsylvania South state plane coordinate system. So let me close this. To set a coordinate system here in InfraWorks, I'm going to click the Tools button, and then I will come down to Model Properties. And we can see that the database is stored in lat long. It'll always be that way, but I can assign a user coordinate system as well, so I can display coordinates. You can see that I've already selected that state plane system. Let me show you how I did that. I clicked this globe, and from here I can select from all of the recognized coordinate systems. I'm going to drag down to USA. You can see all the states there. I'll grab Pennsylvania, and in here, once again, a lot of coordinate systems, but really they're all just variations of north and south. Traditionally, I mean, the ones that are used most often are going to be these NAD 83, or the ones with the 83 in them. So yeah, I can see I've got NAD 83 North Zone US foot, and I've got South Zone US foot. Since we're working in feet, I'm going to go with this one. I will double click to accept that. Note that code there at the beginning, P83SF. That'll come in handy in a little bit. So just double click to assign that, and then you can come down and click OK. So now there's a coordinate system assigned to this model, and as I move my cursor, if you look in the lower left corner down here, you can see the coordinate, the X, Y, and Z, or the northing, easting, and elevation of my cursor location. So now that I have this, I would like to export this surface model for use in Civil 3D. And I'm going to export this as an IMX file. I can use the same Settings and Utilities menu here. I will choose Export IMX. And I am going to export using a bounding box. I could export the whole model if I wanted to, but this way I don't have to export everything. I can export a smaller area. Let me just I'll click once, and then I'll double click to finish my rectangle. And then coordinate system, it's going to export it using that same coordinate system that's assigned to the model. Civil 3D will use that coordinate system to locate it when it gets into the Civil 3D application. All I have to do is select where I'd like to place this IMX, and you can see that I exported one there already. Generally speaking, I've just got a folder I'm working out of here. Under Export, under IMX, we'll overwrite that one I made earlier. Let me just go ahead and click Save. And then I'll click Export. And we'll replace it. There we go. So now I have my USGS surface. At this point, I am going to minimize InfraWorks, and let's pull up Civil 3D. Now, I've just launched Civil 3D. Fortunately, I mean, there's not a whole ton that we have to do in here. Just a couple things. When I'm in Civil 3D, I'm going to go to the tool space. Now, the tool space, that's this palette over here on the left. If you're not seeing the palette, you can click this button in the Home tab. That's what turns it on and off. You can see it's blue because it's on right now. I'm going to assign that coordinate system to this drawing. I'll do that by going to the Settings tab, and then I'll right-click on the drawing name, and I'll choose Edit Drawing Settings. And here on the very first tab, Units and Zone, I can select my coordinate system. I'll open up this drop-down, and you'll see the same coordinate systems that we had over in InfraWorks. We're going to find them here, too. Let me come down to USA, Pennsylvania. There we go. And then I can go through the subset here. We'll find NAD 83, Pennsylvania State Plane, South Zone US foot. Notice the same code. If I simply just wrote that code down, I could have just typed that code here and rather than navigating through these menus. So just a shortcut there. Let me click OK. So that coordinate system is now assigned to this drawing. Let's import that IMX file now. I'm going to do that by just typing IMX. I'll just start typing IMX, I guess, and in the autocomplete here, I'll choose IMX import. And then I will navigate. You can see I did this earlier. I'm going to navigate into that folder where I saved the IMX. I will select that and I'll click open. There's my surface. Now that the surface is in the file, if we come up to the geolocation tab, let me select that. I can come down and in the online map panel, I can open this up and I can say, let's turn on that map aerial image. Since this drawing, we assigned a coordinate system to it now, we put the surface in, we're looking at a specific area. I can now see that surface in relation to my building. So I've got both of these items together now. Next, let's go over to Revit. I'm going to jump into Revit, and then I'm going to go to Open, and I will navigate into the Revit file that was sent. You can see I just made a copy of that. I'm going to select this, and I'll come down and say detach from central. I didn't have access to all the components of the project, so basically I'm creating like just a copy of this project on my local machine, since that way I have ownership of everything to do this demonstration. Let me also say as I work on this that Revit is not my first language. So as I do some things here, you may be cringing. I may be taking the long way in some cases. So I apologize for that. I'm going to go ahead and say ignore. There we go. I am going to, let's go to this floor plan here. Here I can see this represents the first floor plan for this project. What I'd like to do is, in order to reference that surface from Civil 3D into Revit, I need to have something in common between those files. So since it looks like this is the same building that we see in the Civil 3D file, I'm going to use this as my common geometry, but you can use anything that you want. Let's export this. I'm going to come up and say File, Export. I want to export this as a DWG, and let me click the three dots here. I want to export this. We'll go to Units and Coordinates, and I'm going to set one DWG unit equals 1 foot, because that's what the units are set to on Civil 3D, so that way it'll come in the right size. Let me click OK, and I'll click Next, and then InfraWorks to Revit, I'm going to export this as a DWG. And you can see I exported one earlier. I'll just overwrite that one. I'm going to export it as 2018. I don't think I need export views as external references. I don't think I need that. I'm going to uncheck that. And I'll click OK. And we'll go ahead and replace the one that we made earlier. So basically, I'm exporting some geometry out of this Revit file as a 2D view or a 2D file so that I can use that to help me align this later. So now I'm in Civil 3D. Let's externally reference that DWG file. I'll type xref, which brings up my palette. And then in the palette, I can open this menu in the upper left here, and I can say, let's attach a DWG. And then I will grab that first floor DWG file that we just exported. I'll click Open. And when this comes in, I am going to, the only box I'm going to check is this one, insertion point, because I want to pick to place this on screen, because it's not geolocated or anything. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And you can see I'm holding it from my cursor there. I'm just going to go ahead and click to drop that on screen. Now it comes in a little bit dark. That's a courtesy so that you can tell the difference between your reference geometry. If I go to Insert here and I open my reference panel, I can turn off this XREF fading if I click this button. That'll make it a little bit brighter on screen. So now I've got my my building here, and I'm going to use this to align to this building. So I'm going to use a command called align, A-L-I-G-N. I'll just type that in. This allows me to align one object with another. So align, what do I want to align? I'll click this building, and I'll press Enter. And then my first source point, I'm going to hold my Shift key and right-click. This brings up my Object Snap menu, and I can say I want to align this endpoint. And for right now, I'm going to click this corner here. Now that's at the top of the building, so let's keep that in mind. I want to align that there. And then I want to align, shift right click, endpoint here. I wish to align to the corner there. I'm just picking these locations because they show up real nicely in the photo. And there's obviously no object snap there, so I'm just clicking as close as possible. And when I'm finished, I'll hit enter. And then do I want to scale the object? No. That happens to be the default. I'll hit enter again. So that aligned the geometry to my image, but if you remember, we kind of aligned it to the top of the building. If possible, if you can align to something that's at ground level, that's going to be even more accurate. So what I'm going to do, since I know I'm at the top of the building, even though this is an orthographic image, there's still just a little bit of distortion with these things that are, have vertical elevation. I came up and I clicked move, and I want to move this building. Enter. And I don't have to pick an object snap for this. I'm just going to click a point on screen here. I want to move this to like right there. I believe that represents the bottom of the building. Okay. Oop, zoomed out too far. All right. So now my building is aligned to the kind of the base. All right. Here I would need to know what my first floor elevation is, because I mean, we lined XY, but I need to get the Z elevation here as well. Now I don't know what the finished floor elevation is for this project. If I hover my cursor, it will give me the elevation of that surface that we brought in. I can see that's 126.61. If I can hover close here, I can see it's about 126.53. So for the sake of argument here, let's just say that our finished floor elevation or our top foundation, whatever elevation we want to go with here, we'll say it's 126.5. So I'm going to grab this reference, and then I'll press Control 1 to bring up my properties palette. And then from here, I can see my insertion Z. It was inserted at a 0 elevation. I'm going to set this to 126.5. And I'll press Enter. So now it's at that elevation. So we'll assume that that represents our first floor. Okay. Now, let me go ahead and close some of these things up here. I apologize, I'm having a little trouble with my mouse here. So now that I have this in alignment, in 3D alignment, there is a tool. If I go to the toolbox and I open up the subscription extension manager, there's a tool here called Autodesk Shared Reference Point. Here's where I can pick 2 points that I can use, that I can then use to synchronize with my Revit environment. First point is essentially going to be like the origin. That's what it's going to use to align to. And the second point will represent rotation. So I'm going to double click to launch this tool, and it says, what's the origin point? Let's grab, shift right click. I'm going to grab the end point right here. And then the next point is just establishing a rotation. I'm going to grab the end point right there. So there's my X, Y, and my Z. I can see the Z is at 126.5. There's that rotation. My DWG units are feet, and I'll click OK. And no magic here. It's exporting an XML file that contains that information, and you can see that I've exported one of these already. Basically, in my project here, I made a directory called Shared Coordinates. We'll just go ahead and we'll overwrite that one. Okay. So now that I have my shared coordinates, we're going to jump back over to Revit. And in here, in this environment, I can assign those coordinates. I'm going to go to Add-ins, and I'm going to grab the Import Shared Coordinates from XML file. And Revit says, okay, what's the origin point? Here I'm going to pick those same locations that I picked in Civil 3D. My origin point is going to be the end point here. And then the one that determines the rotation will be the end point there. And then it says, okay, what XML file do you want to use to grab those coordinates or that data from? We'll grab the one that we just made, and I'll click Open. And yes, I want to use that, and I'll click OK. So now that shared coordinate system information has been added, I am going to go to Manage, and I'll come down to Location. And here on the Site tab, I will select my shared reference point. And I will say make that current. And I'll click OK. So I've just made that current. The next thing I want to do, if I actually want to see this rotated to north, I will come over and set the orientation from project north to true north. Now, for some reason in this view, once again, I'm not a Revit expert here. For some reason in this view, I can't set that. I'm just going to grab another view here. I'll double click. We'll flip to this view. And in this one, I have the ability to do that. Let me set that to true north. And I'll click apply. There we go. So now that is oriented the same as it is in Civil 3D. So all we have to do now is go to Civil 3D and create the content, the contours and everything that we want to bring in here to create our topography. So let's jump back over to Civil 3D. And at this point, I don't need this reference. I mean, if you want to, you can keep it in there. I'm just going to type xref here, and I'm going to get rid of mine. I will right-click on this connection and say detach. There we go. Basically, I want to get everything out of this file that I don't need. Let's do this. I will select this surface, and I'm going to press Control-1 to bring my properties back up since I closed that a little bit earlier. I can see that this surface is being displayed using contours that are at a 2-foot interval. So if I open up Style here, I am going to change this to 1 and 5 background. That way I'm seeing a contour at every 1 foot of elevation. Because at the risk of destroying the end of the movie here, I'm going to be exporting these contours out and we'll be building our surface in Revit from these contours. So I want to make sure I'm seeing as much detail there as possible. One more thing, just notice this contour here. We can see the elevation if I hover. That's at 129. So keep that elevation in mind, 129. Okay, so this is a Civil 3D surface. I'm going to extract the contour lines from this so that we can export that as a DXF that we can put in Revit, and Revit will understand them. It won't understand the Civil 3D objects. So what I'm going to do, I'll just click the surface, and then I'm going to go to extract here from the contextual ribbon, and I'll say let's extract the objects from this surface. And I don't need to extract the border, but I do want to extract all the major and minor contours. And I'll click OK. If I hit escape now to deselect, if I hover, you can see how it kind of just traced these as polylines. So, same as before, our goal is to clean this drawing out. So I've got these polylines, but I also have that surface still. Let's get rid of that surface. If I go to the Prospector tab, here's where I can see all the data that's in this file. I'm going to go to Surfaces, and I'll right-click on that surface that we brought in, and I'll just choose Delete. I don't need it anymore because I've extracted the contours from it, so I'll click Yes. There we go. So now all I'm left with is just contours. Let's export this drawing now as a DXF. So I'm going to go to the application menu here, and we'll choose Export. I'm going to export this as a DXF file, and we can do it as a 2013. Let's go to Export, DXF. Sure enough, you can see there's one that I exported earlier. I'm just going to overwrite that. Let me click Save. And I got this message before. It didn't hurt anything. I opened the DXF file and it was fine. So that's just a unnecessary warning there. Okay. So now I have the DXF file. Let's bring this into Revit. I'm going to go to Insert, and I'll say Link CAD. And then I'm going to go into my export folder here, and I'll grab the DXF file, and I'll grab that surface file. So I'm importing a DXF, and layers, go ahead and bring them all. Import units, auto detect. I unchecked this, correct lines that are slightly off axis. I don't want to doing any correction or anything because it's good the way it is. Positioning, I'm saying auto by shared coordinates, and I don't think I need to do the orient to view. Let me go ahead and click open. And host model and link do not share the same coordinate system. I am going to use the align option. This will align the link's world coordinates with this model's shared coordinates. So that's what I want to do, and that's fine. Now it's telling me that the items aren't visible in this view. Once again, I apologize, I'm not a Revit guy, but I do know if I come down to the 3D view here, it shows up there. Now let me go to a top view for a second. I'll click the top hotspot here. So we can see that that lines up. But if I bring up my orbit tool here, I can see that the building in this Revit file appears to be lower. So I'm not sure if that was set to a TF, and I regret I don't know enough about Revit to be able to query that very well, but let me show you this. Let me get out of the orbit tool. Now that I have this surface, let's build a topography from it. I'm going to go to Massing and Site, and I'll choose Topo Surface. And I'd like to create from Import. I'll choose Select Import Instance, and I will select this. And I want to build that topography from the content that's just on those two layers, the major minor contours. That's all that's in that file. And I'll click OK. And it'll go through and grab points for all those locations. And then I can go ahead and click the green check here because my surface has been created. Now, let me go back to Orbit here for a second. And I'll tip this up. So there's my surface. Now, what I'm using to check here, if I zoom in, remember when I showed you the contour that was like right here? Remember the elevation on that was 129? That was 129. If I go to Annotate, Spot Elevation, if I get in here, we can see that that is at 129. So that tells me, at least based on my limited knowledge of Revit, I've got the surface in the right location, and the surface is at the appropriate elevation. So I'm hoping that by looking at this, I'm hoping that I've gotten you 99% of the way to where you want to be. If you have any questions or difficulties at all, please let me know. And once again, I hope this was helpful. Thank you.